Welcome to a new episode of the Superpowered Fancast. My name is Darren. When you think about cartoons and being a kid of the 80s, I think about a lot of the cartoons that I used to love. Many people kind of focus on like the bigger hits. Like, you have your He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And considering the popularity of the show, of course, like everything else, it's getting a remake that's coming to Netflix, which frankly from the look of it I can't wait to check out. But what's really funny is that now with all of those things, everything old being new again, now like you've even got the reason why those cartoons existed, which was toys, back on the shelves. And frankly, I seeing those on the shelves at Walmart at over 40 years old, it was kind of like a slap in the face to my parents, who would literally have to hunt down this son of a bitch like in the 80s to try and find it. But you also have like shows like Thundercats, which were again insanely popular to the point where they had, I guess you would call that a reboot or a remake. I don't, because I think it's just weird and wrong. But what do I know? It wasn't made for me. But maybe there are people out there that like it. But then you also have like your G.I. Joe. And even G.I. Joe is making a comeback in the theaters with the Snake Eyes movie. But as a kid of the 90s, there were some great cartoons from that era that have kind of been lost to history or forgotten by most people. So this episode is all about those. So it's going to be the top 10 underrated cartoons of the 80s. And the first cartoon I'm going to talk about at number 10 is called Laser Tag Academy. Now, it was based on the popular game from World of Wonder and originally aired on NBC in 1986. Now, Laser Tag Academy was the story of Jamie Jaron, laser tag champion from the year 3010. Like, Jamie travels back in time to the year 1987 to protect her ancestor Beth, who will eventually create the laser tech technology from a guy named Draxon Dreer. So, I mean, there are definite Terminator vibes both in the premise and the episodes, because a lot of them had to deal with Jamie literally trying to protect her ancestor from getting murdered by a guy from the future. So, which was kind of, a little adult for kids of that era, but they kind of, but it was still like a really fun cartoon. Now, what made laser tag unique was the fact that it was an interactive experience. Like, you bought the Starlight gun and sensor, or if you were rich, you got the harness and the helmet as well, and you went out and you played it with your friends. Now, as much fun as laser tag was, and as much fun as the cartoon is, like many things in life, the real world had to step in and fuck it up for everybody. And kind of what killed laser tag was a combination of both rumors that the gun and the sensor caused cancer, and unfortunately the tragic death of Leonard Falcon, who was playing laser tag at a schoolyard with his friends in California and was killed by a police officer who mistook his Starlight gun for a real gun and used his shotgun and killed Falcon with a 12 gauge shotgun round. So I mean, I'm sorry to have to to start off in a dark place, but they were fun cartoons, but they were really dark times, and it is what it is. Now, the next cartoon I want to talk about is Thundar the Barbarian. Now, this was a Rudy Spears production, and it originally aired on ABC from 1980 to 1981. Now, Thundar was another one that had a really dark premise for a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, it was a rogue planet passes Earth in 1994, funny, causing massive destruction to the planet and the moon. And centuries later, a barbarian slave named Thundar and his companions Ukla the Mock are freed from captivity by Princess Ariel. Now, they roam the post-apocalyptic wasteland fighting evil wizards and things who use what's called a combination of magic and super science. Now, what makes the series like really stand out is there was some real powerhouse talent behind the scenes of the production. Now, writers Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway contributed scripts to many of the episodes. Now, if you know anything about Roy Thomas, he's a co-creator of characters like Wolverine, Vision, Carol Danvers, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and many others, while Conway co-created The Punisher, Jason Todd for DC, Killer Croc, and many other characters. In addition, comic book legend Jack Kirby worked on the production design of the series, including most of the series' villains and secondary characters. So there's a great pedigree behind this series and a lot of great shows. I mean, it was a dark premise, but it was a really good show. Now, the next show I want to talk about is The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers. Now, created for first run syndication, Galaxy Rangers debuted in '86. Now, the show is set in the year 2086 after two aliens travel to Earth looking for allies to fight against something called the Crown Empire. Now, in exchange for the help of Earth, they gave the planet the ability to create their own hyperdrive, allowing mankind to travel to and colonize distant star systems. Now, with the threat of the Crown Empire and other interstellar threats growing, Earth creates a group of interstellar rangers like the Texas Rangers to patrol the universe, protect colonies, and fight against the Crown Empire using implants that give them special abilities. Now, this was one of the rare shows that during that time, there were toys tied to it, but they weren't necessarily advertised the way a lot of toys were. Like they weren't, the toy didn't come first, as far as I know. The toy didn't come first and the cartoon came later. This was really one of those where the cartoon came first and then they made toys after that. And a lot of the stories were really compelling for Saturday mornings. I mean, the animation was beautiful. And many of the stories and characters and situations were way ahead of their time. Now, the next show I want to talk about at number 7 is Captain N, the Game Master. Now, even back in the 80s, there was no denying what this show was designed to do. I mean, the Nintendo Entertainment System had been released in North America in '85. Arcades were, still around, but they weren't getting the kind of traffic that they used to, and people were starting to get, and the NES system was starting to get really popular. Especially its games and characters were seeping into everything from breakfast cereals to magazines to sleepwear. Now, Nintendo would find success in animation with the Super Mario Bros. Super Show and the Legend of Zelda shorts that aired on it, but that same year, NBC aired Captain and the Game Master from 1989 to 1991. Now, the show's premise was perfect in its simplicity. You had teenager Kevin Keene and his dog Duke are sucked into his Nintendo console and wind up in Videoland, where he's tasked with fulfilling an ancient prophecy that he will free Videoland from the evil forces of Mother Brain. Now, using an NES controller on his belt and his NES light gun, Kevin teams up with Princess Lana, Simon Belmont from Castlevania, Kid Icarus, and Mega Man to fight Mother Brain and her minions. Now, most of the episodes featured Kevin and the team traveling to other worlds based on Nintendo games to stop Mother Brain's schemes. Now, it was definitely designed to appeal to kids playing Nintendo games as well as encourage kids to buy the games featured in it, but the show was a lot of fun and it was visually interesting, especially for the time. Like, seeing those characters, those 8-bit characters kind of become animated was great for kids who loved those video games. Now, at number 6, I want to talk about Silverhawks. Now, it's another series created for syndication. Like, Silverhawks was created by Rankin Bass and aired in 1986, a year after another Rankin Bass production, Thundercats, began airing. Now, in the distant future, an alien mob boss named Monstar escapes from prison and reunites with his minions to cause havoc across the galaxy. So then you have Commander Stargazer at Hawk Haven contacts Earth in order to help to bring Monstar in. And now Earth recruits a team, fits them with bionic implants to make them, according to the song, partly metal, partly real, and sends them out into deep space to fight crime. Now, the show, again, it was a fun show. Like, the stories were compelling, the characters had personality. Unfortunately, for Silverhawks, coming out after Thundercats meant it would be compared to Thundercats. And when you have two villains that give speeches before transforming and having both Monstar and Mumra both voiced by Earl Hammond, there's no way Silverhawks could escape the comparison to Thundercats. So coming in at number 5 is Defenders of the Earth. Now this was created by Marvel Productions and King Features. Now Defenders of the Earth was actually a really unique series in many ways. Now it originally aired in syndication from 86 to 87, and Defenders of the Earth introduced a new generation to some classic characters. Now the series was led by Flash Gordon, a character first introduced in comic strips in the 30s. The show also featured his teammates Madrick the Magician and the Phantom, both created by Lee Falk and also debuted in newspaper comic strips around the same time. Now the new characters in the series were the team's mechanic and bodyguard Lothar, and the children of the characters who were training to be the next generation of Defenders, fighting against Ming the Merciless. Now what was unique about the show was the concept of passing the torch to a new generation, and the legacy characters being compelling enough to make me go back and actually read their individual stories. Now coming in at number 4 is Jason the Wheeled Warriors. Now I'm just going to put it out there and be honest. As a Star Wars fan, my 9-year-old self in 1985 knew that Jason the Wheeled Warriors was two things. It was an attempt by Mattel to get me to buy toys, absolutely, that were connected to the series, and believe me, I wanted them. And it was probably the most blatant Star Wars ripoff I could imagine at the time. Now, I had seen Return of the Jedi in theaters 2 years prior. I knew who and what these characters were when I saw the opening credits, but it didn't make the series any less fun to watch. Now, it was developed by J. Michael Straczynski, who was the creator of Babylon 5 and Sense8. The series follows the adventures of Jace and his allies as they search the galaxy for Jace's missing father to unite the magic root and stop Saul Boss and his army of monster minds. Now, Jace uses his ring of light and the powers of the magic root to help him in battle. And because of that, I mean, the comparisons are right there. Like, Jace is obviously a Luke Skywalker. Flora is obviously a Leia, just a really bad version of Leia. Like, the space pirate Herc couldn't be more of a Han Solo clone. And you have the wizard Gillian, who is obvious Obi-Wan Kenobi ripoff, and even the robot squire Un is really just a stand-in for both C-3PO and R2-D2. Now, the series was still really fun to watch, and I'll be honest with you, the toys were just really cool. Like, I really love those toys. Now, at number 3 is Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I'm going to talk about this, but it's also going to be a little dark. There's going to be some dark things connected to this series and the time, especially during the time that it came out. Now, D&D creators TSR teamed with Marvel Productions to bring their expansive tabletop role-playing game to the masses with an animated series that took a group of regular kids and put them in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. As a fan of the game and a player, it was cool because, I really liked the fact that they were going to use Tiamat. I wanted to see Tiamat come to life, so to speak. Now, the group of kids that get on a ride called Dungeons and Dragons and get pulled into a fantasy world, courtesy of the kindly little dungeon master. And they're each given roles including ranger, magician, thief, acrobat, and so on. Now, they find themselves facing off against the evil wizard Venger. Now, Venger is seeking to take their magic weapons and use it against Tiamat. Now, each episode was kind of like a campaign where the heroes were tasked by Dungeon Master to travel across the world to find a way home with Venger and other evil creatures hunting or scheming against them. Now, out of most of the cartoons at the time, it was probably one of the more innocent shows, but unfortunately it couldn't escape something that happened in the 80s that is not affectionately known as the Satanic Panic. Now, what a lot of people today would call cancel culture. Now, I'm going to tell you straight out, kids, like, say, if you think cancel culture is bad, the Satanic Panic was just ridiculous, just infinitely worse, to the point of like having, it was literally kind of the beginning of advanced censorship. Like there were labels on everything. And just a couple of examples, like especially in one specifically connected to Dungeons and Dragons. Like you would literally have op-eds in newspapers saying like Dungeons and Dragons just harmless fun or sorcery. Like they were so scared and upset about like kids playing anything that had to do with fantasy because they immediately linked it to Satan. Like everything got connected to Satan. And even like, and you know what, I'm looking at you, Oprah, even like talk shows were talking about cults and horror movies and satanic worship, and it was a weird time, especially a weird time to be a kid when you just really wanted to watch a cartoon that you thought was cool, and everyone else, especially adults who didn't even watch the show, just immediately thought that you were into something satanic. So it's just really kind of weird. But darkness aside, let's get back to the list. Now, my number 2 on the list is Mask. Now, Mask was the answer to the question, what do you do when you need to compete with both G.I. Joe and Transformers? And the answer was, you combine them. Like, they're originally airing in 1985. Mask stands for Mobile Armored Strike Command. Yes, command with a K. The show was pretty simple in its premise. You had Mac Tracker and his friends form a mass team and use their transforming armored vehicles to stop the criminal organization of Venom. Now, Venom usually did a lot of low-level crimes like counterfeiting, extortion, theft, but they also had access to the same technology as Mask, so they would inevitably clash. The series even had its own kind of Spritle and Chim Chim characters from Speed Racer in the form of Matt's son Scott and his robot / motor scooter. But you know, for a 30-minute toy commercial, like the show was fun from start to finish. It had a really interesting concept. Now, what's funny is that while the show only lasted a year, Hasbro is bringing it back to the big screen in a live-action adventure. And it's actually going to be directed by the director of Fate of the Furious. So, you know, someone who knows about a vehicle action adventure. But going into my number 1 anime underrated show of the 80s is Bionic 6. And I loved Bionic 6 because, one, it was just like it had a catchy ass theme song, but there was a lot of other layers to it. Now, in the 70s, Lee Majors starred in a popular series called The $6 Million Man. It was about an astronaut who was rebuilt with bionic implants after an accident. 3 years into its run, there was a spin-off show called The Bionic Woman that aired, and it was as successful. Now, in 1987, Universal Television created a series that was loosely based on this concept. Instead of a bionic man and a bionic woman, this time it would be a bionic family. Now, it was created by Ron Friedman, who also created and developed both G.I. Joe and Transformers. And Bionic 6 is the story of the Bennett family. You had test pilot Jack, who was originally given bionic implants, and his wife and children get them after the family's involved in an accident during a family trip. Now, their adventures usually had them using their bionic enhancements to fight Dr. Scarab. And their powers include super speed, strength, and agility. But like everything in the 80s, it was campy at times and goofy at others. But it was one of the first animated series that actually kind of had some good representation for characters of color. Now, the family was ethnically diverse, with the Bennetts adopting an Asian and African American son. Unfortunately, even with that level of representation, there were still things that were problematic, especially when the Asian son Bunji's code name is Karate One. Despite this, the show, again, it was really fun. It had awesome animation in comparison to a lot of the other animated shows that were out there at the time. Now, I can't give you the sweet without giving you the bitter. So, one of the other things that a lot of studios did at the time is that they wanted to capitalize on really popular films at the time. But what's funny is that if you knew anything about the 80s was really just the apex of R-rated films, R-rated fare. So, and it being the 80s, there was probably a lot of people on cocaine at the time. So what's really funny is I don't know how much of it went into some of this stuff, but it had to be some. So I'm going to give you a couple of dishonorable mentions of animated shows that came out that, in my opinion, just really did not belong. There was really no reason for them. So it's like my first dishonorable mention is going to be RoboCop, the animated series. Now, Marvel Productions actually thought this was a good idea, and it was created by the writer of the live action movie. The show aired a year after the movie was released. Now, I want to know, like, not taking into account that kids who would watch the show would be too young to see the rated R film it was based on, the show tried to soften the image of a character who was slaughtered by criminals and proceeded to kill them one by one. Like, did anyone think that a movie based, that maybe basing a kid's show off a movie where the hero literally shoots a guy in the dick might be a bad idea? I mean, he literally shoots a guy in the nuts during an attempted rape. Like, and someone in a room decided, you know what? I'm going to make an animated kids show out of this. Now, my next dishonorable mention is going to be along the same lines. It's called Rambo, The Force of Freedom. Now, this is another one I had issue with at the time it came out. Like, somebody actually thought that kids would want to watch a cartoon series about a Vietnam vet with PTSD who systemically takes out a group of cops hunting him down. Like, my dad showed me and my brothers the original First Blood, and it freaked out my 8-year-old mind. There was no way a cartoon version of Sylvester Stallone in any form was going to appeal to me. But again, somebody in a room somewhere in California in the 80s, and you know what was going on during that time, decided that, you know what, kids want to see a PTSD-riddled vet hunting down criminals around the world in animated form. Who knows? 1980s, I guess. So that's my list of the top 10 underrated cartoons of the 80s. Like, what are some of your favorites? Like, did you know all or any of these shows existed? Maybe there's some that I missed. Like, let me know what some of your favorites are. You can let me know by emailing me at superpoweredfancast@gmail.com. You can go to superpoweredfancast.com and leave a comment under this episode that'll be on the website tomorrow. You can also follow me on Twitter at superpoweredfan. As always, you can find latest news and reviews on my website, superpoweredfancast.com. Until next time, this is Darren signing off. Thank you all for watching.